Welcome to this episode of Eureka, and we are having a very interesting guest on this show today. We have Mr. Photosynthesis, Dr. Govindjee, who was a Professor of Emeritus at University of Illinois in US, an Indian who had gone there and made a mark in the world of science. Before we continue this show, we'll take a quick look at his brief profile. Keep watching Eureka. This show is going to be really very interesting.
Photosynthesis is a complex chemical process essential to all aerobic life on our planet and also a key component for the plant growth. It is where Professor Govindjee has worked extensively. Presently, Dr. Govindjee is a Professor Emeritus at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He obtained his bachelor's and master's from Allahabad University, and after that went to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign to earn his PhD in 1960. Over the course of his professional career, Professor Govindjee's research has encompassed many aspects of photosynthesis, especially the initial events of the process. One of his most famous breakthroughs, he discovered that bicarbonate and carbonate not only produce sugar during photosynthesis but also play a critical role in photosystem II, providing protons at a key step in photosynthesis. Govindjee has not only provided the first comprehensive theory of thermoluminescence in algae and plants, but has also shown how prompt and delayed fluorescence of chlorophyll A can be used as a signature of various reactions in photosynthesis. Professor Govindjee received various national and international awards. Noted among them are Lifetime Achievement Award from the Rebase Foundation for Basic Research and the 2007 Communication Award of the International Society of Photosynthesis Research. Professor Govindjee was elected a Fellow and Life Member of the National Academy of Sciences in India.
Thank you, sir, for being with us in the show. It's a very wonderful opportunity. I can see you are a very young old man. Even now you are bubbling with enthusiasm the moment we talk about science. I mean, that's what I can see you right in your face and in our conversation before this show. So let me start with this question. Your work, your seminal work in maybe about 3 decades, 4 decades of your research career?
6 years, yeah.
Has been spent on studying photosynthesis.
Right.
But in school textbook, we study that the idea of photosynthesis was developed almost about 100 years ago. Initially, Priestley discovered that plants emit oxygen, and then subsequently Ignace discovered that light is essential. So in a sense, photosynthesis is known. So what is there to study?
Well, initially it was just a black box, what goes in and what comes out, and that was it. But in order for us to do anything about it, we have to understand the details, the steps it takes. And so
So when you say black box, what you mean is that, for example, the light goes in, the water goes in, maybe from atmosphere the air goes in.
Yeah, CO2, carbon dioxide
goes in.
And you got the food and oxygen.
But what exactly happens in between, we were not known.
Absolutely nothing was known.
Okay. You are called as Mr. Photosynthesis. So which means that, I mean, I don't know what your wife will say. Maybe your first love was photosynthesis, right? So how did you fall in love with...
No, my first love was my wife, Rajni. But photosynthesis was my second love.
Yeah, so how did you fall in love with this?
So I was a student in Allahabad University, and a bachelor student, and I ran a mock symposium in which I had students, 6 of us became the different discoverers of photosynthesis. And therefore, I ran the mock symposium and I was very happy to act as Ingenhus, who discovered light.
Okay.
I was fascinated and nothing was known. And so it was only when I was in master's degree, and Sri Ranjan, my professor, who had studied photosynthesis under Felix Frost Blackman in England, came, said, you boys go to the library and find out what you are excited about. So I went to the library and studied a paper of a man named Robert Emerson, who by the way is a grandson or grandnephew of Ralph Waldo Emerson. And I was fascinated by that paper. So I wrote him a letter after I became a lecturer in botany at Allahabad University. Dear Professor Emerson, I do not understand what you discovered in 1943, and I want to solve that problem together with you, and I want to come and work for PhD with you. He said, dear Govindjee, please come, I'm organizing a fellowship for you.
Oh, that's how you landed up in US.
And then he said, apply for Fulbright travel grant, and so I did. It was he who asked me to apply, and I got the Fulbright. So that's how I ended up there, but he died in a plane crash in 1959. But anyway, that's...
So, once you went there, I mean, for your PhD also, you took up this work on investigating photosynthesis,
yes,
right? Yeah?
absolutely.
So, what was your initial work? Which part of the problem you
So,
took
the
it up?
first thing was light comes in and it produces oxygen, and what are the steps? How many steps? Are there one light reaction or two light reactions? And Emerson's work had indicated that there may be two light reactions.
Okay.
And therefore, I said, let me study that, find out.
When you say there were a possibility of two light reactions, what are they?
Two separate light reactions. One light reaction will help in the oxidation of water to oxygen.
Okay.
And the other light reaction will produce a reducing power which will be needed to take carbon dioxide and add the reducing power to make sugar for you. So
Okay.
that's the second light.
Okay, so which means that the light is absorbed and part of it is to produce oxygen, I mean oxidization, and the second is to produce sugars.
Yeah, two. They happen at the same time.
Same time, but then separately. But
Simultaneously they happen, and then there is a connection between now what we call them photosystem 1 and photosystem 2.
Okay.
The name was given later. Emerson died in a plane crash, so he could not see the outcome of these results. And so I was involved, and I had to take a PhD under a different professor who was a lovely man. His name is Eugene Ivanovich Rabinovich, and he was a chemist. And he put his hand on my shoulder and said, will you be my student? I said, I'm a biologist, you are a chemist, so don't worry, you do whatever you want to do.
very
That's
interesting.
precisely how I work with Rabinovich.
Very interesting. But in fact, the question that you are asking is about a biological system, right?
Yes.
In any case, yeah.
Ab-
So, what was your specific study?
So the first study, I will give you the first study because that's my PhD thesis. And that first study said, Emerson said that there are two light reactions, only not published, only in a conference in which we drove together in the same car. He drove and I sat in the back. And he said, one light reaction done by one type of chlorophyll, which is a green pigment, it's called chlorophyll A, and the other reaction is done by chlorophyll B. He didn't know what reaction they are. And I would tell him, and we would call him Professor Emerson at that time, not Bob, but later, and said, Professor Emerson, there is a research in Holland which says every photon light going to B ends up in chlorophyll A. How can it be? You cannot be right. He said, Govindjee, I am an experimentalist, and this is my result. You prove it something different, I will accept that. But unless there is an experiment, I did the experiment after he had passed away, and I published it with Rabinovich in Science. Chlorophyll A was in both systems,
Okay.
and it was a different type of chlorophyll A. That was my first paper.
So, one of your first study was to find out how the light is being used for this.
But these two different. Which light? Which light? Because B absorbs orange light, A absorbs reddish light.
Okay. That's an interesting point we'll explore. So, which means that when you say light, the light coming from sun is
Yes.
consisting of multiple wavelengths,
Absolutely.
right? Multiple colors in a popular sense.
Absolutely.
So, you are saying different part of the spectrum is used for different purposes.
Yes, in a way. So it is a matter of all wavelengths of light are absorbed by both pigment systems.
Okay.
It just so happens that one of the pigment systems, which we call photosystem 1, which is leading to the production, the reducing power, it absorbs the longer wavelength of light.
Okay, okay.
And the other one, shorter wave. However, all light is absorbed and then transferred to certain very special molecules. We can call it daddy molecule or mommy molecules, as you prefer. And so one of the daddy molecules is, let's say, called one photosystem, the other a mommy molecule.
Very interesting. This is where we'll take a very short break. Keep watching Eureka. After the break, we are going to discuss with him. We have studied photosynthesis is like a factory. Leaf is a factory where things go in, there are things produced. We are going to discuss this in detail after the break. Keep watching Eureka.
Wake up to a complete roundup of news from India and abroad. Politics, strategy, business, sports. Keen analysis to kickstart your day. Watch Breakfast News weekdays at 8 a.m. on Rajya Sabha Television.
Welcome back to Eureka. We are having a very wonderful conversation with Dr. Govindjee, who is a professor of Emeritus at University of Illinois in US. He completed his master's in Allahabad University, and he has a very long career of almost 50 to 60 years in studying photosynthesis. In school textbook, we study photosynthesis usually as, leaf is a factory where there are inputs like water and sunlight and carbon dioxide from air, and there is output, oxygen, and the leaf produces its food, glucose. So you are saying you wanted to look at what happens inside the leaf when this thing goes inside. One of the steps that you looked at is photosynthesis 1 and photosynthesis 2, two parts where two reactions took place. What else were your major investigations?
Well, the first thing is to say that these two light reactions are connected to each other. So the electrons are going from photosystem 2 to photosystem 1 in order for photosystem 1 to perform. These electrons are ultimately coming from water molecules.
Okay.
So, carbon dioxide is fixed to make sugar. There was a man named Otto Warburg, Nobel laureate in Germany. He was actually the PhD professor of my professor, Robert Emerson.
Okay.
So now he discovered that all these electron transfer reactions cannot go on without carbon dioxide. So he said, you guys, I didn't use the word guys, whatever the German word was, he said, you don't know that actually the oxygen comes from carbon dioxide. This experiment proves that oxygen comes from carbon dioxide, because without carbon dioxide we cannot have oxygen evolution, even though we are not doing any glucose formation.
Okay, okay. So you are saying that the oxygen that is being exhaled by the leaf comes from the carbon dioxide?
No, that's what Warburg said.
Okay,
So
that is what the claim was.
That Warburg claimed, and he is a Nobel laureate.
Then the alternative can be that the oxygen came from water. There are two possibilities, right?
It was accepted by a lot of people that oxygen comes from water. But Warburg made that statement when he discovered that carbon dioxide was needed for the reaction which does not involve glucose formation. So he made that big statement. Now I was teaching a course and I gave this to my class. And I said, he cannot be right. Everybody looking at Govindjee, how can he challenge something like that coming from a Nobel laureate? All right. So I presented it to the class. One of my PhD students named Alan Stemler, who's retired now. Most of my students are retired, by the way, retired from University of California. He said, I want to do this.
Okay.
I said, Alan, great. So therefore, we started working on to finding out what does carbon dioxide do in this photo reactions, light reaction. And that's what we discovered. I have 5 PhD students, including one from India, Rita Khanna. And we discovered that carbon dioxide as bicarbonate was needed for electron flow from photosystem 2 to 1.
Okay.
Without carbon dioxide, nothing happens. And now I'm still going after it.
Okay, okay. So now one question that comes to my mind is when the plant exhales oxygen, where does that oxygen come from? Is it from
Water.
Water, not from carbon dioxide.
So that is what we proved, and that is what another man named Martin Kamen, the discoverer of carbon-14, also proved when Warburg had criticism against his work, but he could not. When we published this work, Warburg ignored it totally,
Okay.
but the rest of the world accepted our work.
It's a very, very important point, because one of the greatest misconceptions, like many of us might have, is the plants convert the carbon dioxide in the air into oxygen.
No.
But that is not actually,
That
that
is
is not
absolutely wrong.
exactly, yeah. That's a very, very important point. How actually investigations tell us something radically different from your prejudices. That's what I think is an important point that you made. Okay, so this was your second major work with respect to photosynthesis. Then,
So now we needed to we had to take the things apart, it's step by step to find the details. So we decided to find out what is the first step. And we then discovered how fast the first step takes place, in which the light energy is converted into chemical energy.
you use the word something like first step.
Yeah.
So if in a very general term, if I have to
It's a
ask, how
time
many
scale.
steps are there?
It's in time scale. There
Yeah.
are thousands of steps, but we can break it down into, let's say, 10 steps or something like that. Okay, let us.
So something like a broad 10 steps are there.
Let's say broad 10 steps like
So in
that.
that first step, what is the
First
work that
step
you-
is the light absorption and conversion of light energy into chemical energy, meaning thereby production of an electron on one side, a production of hole on the other side.
Okay.
So in the photosystem 2, which is the water oxidation system, water provides everything. It provides the electrons and provides the protons that go out into the system, and the electrons then go to in between two photosystems.
Okay. How much time it takes? You said when you say steps, it means that it takes time. Everything takes
Yeah,
time.
right. So the first step that we measured was in picoseconds, in 10 to the minus 12th of a second.
10 to the minus 12. So I mean 1 second I divide by 1 followed by
Many zeros.
12
let's say.
zeros.
Yeah.
Yeah, a number that is unpronounceable.
Right.
And that is the kind of time scale you are
Exactly.
talking
So
about.
it's very fast. But then the slower reaction of water oxidation is in milliseconds, it's 10 to the minus 3 seconds. So that's the slowest reaction.
Very, very, very interesting, and this is where we will take a very short break. After the break, we are going to ask him, we are now studying photosynthesis. Can we make artificial photosynthesis? Keep watching Eureka. After the break, we are going to continue this conversation.
Tales that inspire. Stories of social change. A salute to diversity. Promoting public discourse. Events that motivate. Inspiring the innovative spirit. Watch Rajya Sabha television documentaries.
Welcome back to Eureka. We are having a very interesting, very informative, very exciting conversation with Dr. Govindjee, who is a professor of Emeritus at University of Illinois. Sir, before the break, we talked about your second love. That's what you want to publicly say, but I suspect that that's your first love, photosynthesis. So what about your the real first love, your wife? How does he take about
Well,
this?
my wife was a student, a year junior to me at University of Allahabad.
Okay.
And we together, after her MSc, she and me and another friend of mine was my class fellow, his name is Laloria, and a person named Raja Rao, we four of us sat together and discussed things together in Ranjan's lab.
Okay.
And that's where I met her, and that's where I fell in love with her, and I'm glad she married me, she accepted me. And she did work in photosynthesis, because when I went to Emerson, I asked her what will she like to do. She said, I would also like to work in photosynthesis. She applied to Emerson. Emerson accepted her immediately and even gave her a fellowship immediately. And then she worked together. She had a paper. None of us had a paper with Emerson, but paper with Rabinovich. And she made also major discoveries in the kind of things that I did not discuss, because it was a question whether photosynthesis, whether the two light reaction is in photosynthesis or is it in photorespiration. And she proved that it is not in respiration but in photosynthesis. That was her PhD thesis, also
Very, very
published in Science.
Interesting.
2 weeks after my paper.
So basically both of you have one common love.
Yes.
And perhaps the second common love. also,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Yeah. That's a
She went into slightly different to find out how bacteriorhodopsin functions later.
Okay, interesting. So now another surprising result that you worked on is, we all know that plants absorb light. You worked on a problem where the plant gives off light.
Right.
What is it actually?
So when light falls on a chlorophyll molecule, there are three pathways. One is photochemistry, which is photosynthesis.
Okay.
Two is heat, and three is light. And that is called prompt fluorescence.
Okay.
And then we studied this prompt fluorescence. I discovered already in near my PhD thesis that the two light effect also.
Can I just ask a small question? See, when we see a leaf green, that's basically because the green part of the spectrum, the leaf is not absorbing. Green part of the spectrum and maybe few other part of the spectrum that the leaf is not absorbing and reflecting back.
Right.
Is this what you mean?
No.
No. Yeah. No. That clarification was
that is the
needed.
green light that is from transmission or not absorption. Now
That is not what you are
no,
talking
this fluorescence is red, only red. It is totally red, and you can see it. And actually, there's a man who actually saw it with his eyes. So you put a red filter, shine light, and then you can see that plant is giving off light. It is very small percent, 3% of the light.
Okay.
But now we use this fluorescence, as we call it, in order to understand photosynthesis. And
Fluorescence means what?
fluorescence means light just thrown out as light, as a
So basically the body absorbs light in some other frequency, and after some time it throws out light in a particular frequency.
and that is red light. It's
Red
thrown
light in
out
this
as red,
case, yeah.
and it has a wavelength maximum in the red, 685 nanometers, if you want to know what the number is.
You are telling about this fluorescence in plants. Can you tell us?
So this fluorescence then acts as a indicator. We use it as a surrogate, so to say, of what is going on in photosynthesis, because it is kind of anti-parallel. And so we studied it, and what we have found, and many people, of course, a lot of people studied it, we have found that you can use it to understand the productivity of the plant, to find out how productive a particular plant will be. We did some experiments in China. My main relationship within India and China. And so we did it with a group in China in Shanghai. We did it with group here, with Ashwani Parikh here in JNU. And so we are very excited to use this. And now we can also study this long term in seconds and minutes. This is 1 second, we can study it to relate it to the reactions. And longer, it tells you about how plants is regulating these two light reactions. So that's why fluorescence is dear to me.
This is also very interesting because surprising, most of us would not know that the plant is actually also throwing out light. That's very interesting. Now we don't have much time, but this question I need to ask. We are studying the plant, particularly the photosynthesis, lot of knowledge we have gained. Are we in the business of generating artificial photosynthesis?
Yes, absolutely yes. Not only artificial, but we are in the business of increasing natural photosynthesis also, which is a very big thing today.
Okay, okay.
So for the artificial photosynthesis, so photovoltaics, you know very well, you mentioned earlier in a private conversation, photovoltaics use infrared light. And so one of the things, I have a friend named Robert Blankenship in St. Louis, and Blankenship, with many authors, wrote a paper in Science saying, why is plants, we cannot make plants use the infrared light that the photovoltaics use? And so the artificial photosynthesis people said, we can do it. So they have produced one of the papers, recent carbon nanotubes or something, and they have put it in the plant, put it in near the chloroplast. And the light that is absorbed, the infrared light, is transferred and it is being used. So that's one big measure through, and this is a kind of, it's like a marriage, not totally artificial, but artificial photosynthesis put in the natural photosynthesis, and I really fascinated with this research. But the other people, I will mention a name, Daniel Nocera, who was at MIT, now he's at Harvard. He is saying, Govindjee, I will produce better energy than you can do in a leaf, and I'll do it totally artificially. And so that group, there are chemists who are trying to do mimicking photosynthesis without learning from photosynthesis.
Okay.
And then mimicking it to make it efficient artificially. And there's tremendous interest today among chemical engineers and chemists to do that. And I'm very delighted that I am alive to see that happen.
So when you were a student, your life started as understanding pathways of photo.
Taking it apart,
Yeah. Now people are trying to put it together.
put it together and improve it. And that's what I must say, that the group here at JNU, which you perhaps will interview, they're doing it in rice.
Okay. So you started your scientific life as a student trying to understand what is photosynthesis by taking it apart, studying different parts. Now people are putting together. What's
So the question is to improve it, to change it. And when you change it, for instance, give you one example, and I will quote people in Urbana, Illinois, my friends, doing beautiful research, again published in Science just recently. So what they're doing, so photosynthesis per se is going on, but there is another thing happening, which is respiration, the same enzyme, which is called Rubisco, like biscuit, Nabisco, Rubisco. That enzyme not only acts on CO2, but also acts on oxygen. And that is a waste. It's a waste. So therefore, what Don Ort's group is doing, I know the people there, Paul South, his postdoc, what they are doing is they are taking from another system, E. coli even, pathways. Then they have taken the genes and put it together. They have done it in tobacco, and it will be extended to other plants soon. And they have improved many percent, maybe 30, I don't quite know exactly, and improved photosynthesis by cutting down on this photorespiration and having an alternate pathway. That's one pathway.
that is another.
And there's another thing I can say if you wish. So there's another group in Urbana headed by Steve Long, and I again know the postdoc, Vane Kramajic and others. And what they have done, they say this heat, so I talked about light, this heat, plants have a way of protecting themselves against by throwing out heat when there's too much light.
Okay.
And what they have discovered, how to manipulate that process, and they have genes, they have changed the plant such that it can now function better, it recovers faster in darkness, and it's also many percentage higher productivity.
Very, very interesting. That's a very interesting point. A last question. Today we are looking at sun as a provider of energy. The fossil fuels are not good for the planet Earth. Non-renewables, others are also having limitation. The only solution perhaps is going to come from sun. Where do you see this artificial photosynthesis in that framework?
Well, to be honest with you, I have a lot of hopes, but I cannot vouch where it will go. All I know is that it's a very, very important direction that's being taken. But at the same time, as I said, the natural photosynthesis, the natural process must be at the same time improved, just like we are going for artificial photosynthesis.
Very, very interesting point. We had a very, very interesting conversation. Thank you for being in this show. Thank you for watching this show. We'll come back with another interesting episode next week. Keep watching Eureka.